Hello, my name's Elijah Wells and today's review is Christopher Nolan's new movie, Oppenheimer. Based on one of the most iconic yet controversial physicists of all time, J. Robert Oppenheimer, and his creation of the Manhattan Project, which of course created the first atomic bomb that would eventually land on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and how that ushered in the Cold War, and as well as the security hearings that he was involved with, and a Senate hearing that took place years after after World War II, and of course his marriage that was falling apart, him having an affair, and how the politics almost got in the way of him creating the atomic bomb that would just say completely revolutionized warfare for many years to come. The movie does also follow Oppenheimer being taken under the wing of Louis Strauss, who later would form a massive rivalry with, and being also taken under wing by General Leslie Groves, being portrayed by Matt Damon, and how he was most of the time very supportive about the Manhattan Project until it became very leaky towards the Soviets and the Cold War would begin. This was the first Christopher Nolan movie without the involvement of Warner Brothers after he had a very public falling out with the studio over the release plan of Tenet and his views on streaming, which did cause him to, according to some rumors, have a bit of some full-on arguments. Again, this is his first film in 20 years to also get an R rating, or here in the United Kingdom, it got a 15 rating for its language and sex. But this is obviously going to be one of his more different movies as of throughout his massive career, and some have already called it his magnum opus, which, again, this is a man who has the most critically consistent output of his directorial works. Even if it's a Tenet movie, people weren't too crazy about it and didn't do exactly too well, as it was back then, one of the few films that was released during the heat of the pandemic. But knowing this was released literally at the very same day as Barbie, you can check the review out if you want, would just say the anticipation, kind of like the nuclear bomb itself, it was extremely hot to the point people probably got toasted in the process of it. And of course, it was a massive critical success and a humongous box office success. And what do I think of Oppenheimer itself? I really enjoyed this movie, but I'll get into more detail why, because of things like this. Even though it doesn't appear as much that this movie doesn't appear to play around with time as much, but to be honest, it kind of did, as in, it did follow Oppenheimer from his time in Cambridge University to basically residing in Los Alamos during the creation of the Manhattan Project, which would create a nuclear bomb. And of course, this is where it diverts a little bit, as it does intercut between three different storylines, as there was a security hearing in 1954 when it turned out his secret keeping was more leaky than an old paddling pool. And in 1959 there was this Senate meeting, which is Strauss being betrayed by Robert Downey Jr. for his confirmation hearing, and finding out that he had a huge rivalry with Oppenheimer for various reasons, including like inviting communists into the Manhattan Project, and how he essentially started the Cold War either by accident or deliberately, and the politics that kind of overshadowed the entire thing in his opinion. A lot of the cast members, Cillian Murphy, who played Oppenheimer, Emily Blunt, who plays Kitty, Matt Damon, Robert Downey Jr., Florence Pugh, and as well as brief performances here and there with Rami Malek, Kenneth Branagh, and Gary Oldman, who only appears as President Truman in the movie, all turn out brilliant performances in this movie, in this really dense 3-hour-long movie, even though the third act did drag out a titty bit longer than it should have. But again, this is one of Nolan's more dense movies, I would say. Again, the visual effects works in this movie are done, majority of which are done practically, since Christopher Nolan has stated in a various amount of interviews leading up to this movie before they got abruptly halted due to the actor strike and the writer strike. He did say that using practical effects gave it a bit more of a punch for the movie and made the tension a bit more realistic, juxtaposition to like CGI effects. Knowing that in mind, he does play on with like explosions, and he did imply that it was almost something like the visual effects work done in like the Fountain or the Tree of Life, where they did use certain amount of chemicals, a lot of like specific zoom-ins to create the eventual nuclear explosion that was tested in Los Alamos, which is his very attention to detail, which is pretty much now a trademark of his career, as in him staying as far away as possible with computer effects only when it's really needed to, and staying towards more practical effects. This is also Nolan's second work with film composer Ludwig Göransson, who has worked previously with him with his previous movie Tenet, and he does play a lot to his strengths, particularly in the opening scenes, and particularly in the opening scene where Oppenheimer has these visions of particles in his head during his time in Cambridge, which is a very gorgeous to look at, both cinematically and an aesthetically pleasing movie. And Ludwig Göransson's violin focused score in this movie is incredibly gorgeous to hear as well. Even though I'm not entirely too sure if Nolan does plan to reunite with Hans Zimmer, who has been his usual collaborator as of before Tenet, but I feel like that Ludwig is also set up for a really great and fruitful future with Christopher Nolan, particularly within their score. And the film's cinematography and visual effects are incredible as well, and very good as well, particularly that he spares no expense, the director who is known for that type of work. The way the movie builds tension, particularly in scenes where he's congratulating the members of the Manhattan Project and during a security hearing in 1954, what is really strange is that the background would usually move really violently and really vigorously, something that fans of the Darren Aronofsky movie Requiem for a Dream would definitely appreciate. And also suddenly a big gleaming light would appear, blinding anything it will see, and people will just disappear, adding to Oppenheimer's hallucination and daunting realization of nuclear warfare and what he's opened, like almost like a Pandora's box of fear, being the Cold War, and the what he's just unleashed into the world. And it could have happened like a bomb could have dropped near to him outside of World War II, like that grappling fear that he had, and downright paranoia that he developed. Particularly that he became growing more distrusting of people. Particularly he was involved in many hearings and was being called out as a communist sympathetic, which does picture his paranoia, particularly in the third act, even though it might drag on a little bit for some people, the third act, but it definitely showcased his paranoia to his most paramount, and what was his big concern, particularly of the safety of his family and to himself. The story of the Bringer of Death and Destroyer of Worlds also does have views regarding the hydrogen bomb, which he has vocally been critical of, and which did cause a lot of feathers to be shaken at best, and particularly with Shores, who was at the heat of his rivalry with him, accusing Oppenheimer of picking scientists one by one to turn against him, even with Einstein, who does have a brief performances in the movie, particularly in one scene when they were having a conversation in the pond, in his garden pond, and then Oppenheimer just walks away disappointed, and Shores kind of interpreted that he was being picked out one by one, and with Einstein being the first of them. But in the ending, it does the contents of that conversation does come to fruition, and it's really chilling, particularly in the visuals that are depicted in the final scene, and what Oppenheimer has opened up for the world, almost like a Pandora's box, in a sense of the world. Like, fear is pretty much spreading out that box, and it will never contain itself again, and it will never go back in that box at all, which is a very terrifying thought, and something Oppenheimer has a somewhat of an ambiguous view on, like whether nuclear weapons made the world safer or way more dangerous as the Cold War would proceed after World War II. This is definitely Christopher Nolan's darkest film yet, and definitely his powerhouse of a movie at best. The performances that a lot of the cast give are extraordinary. The direction and screenplay by Nolan himself is brilliant. The cinematography is gorgeous. The music of Little Göransson is definitely a highlight in this movie. The visual effects, although mainly practical as a trademark of Nolan's work, is extraordinarily gorgeous and beautiful to look at, and using a lot of minerals, a lot of practical effects like explosions of course, and using a lot of chemicals like I did say earlier. This is definitely more of a focus of the paranoia and the ambiguous nature of nuclear weapons and the role they play throughout the world's safety post World War II and as well as the Cold War, and his general paranoia and having a lot of communist sympathetics and actual communists in the Manhattan Project, which did rub a lot of people in the US government and in several other commissions down the wrong way. This is definitely a expansive and definitely one of the biggest films Nolan gives, especially the movie is literally 3 hours long, and definitely, no kidding, definitely one of his most explosives as well. As let's just say, this is one movie everyone is going to be talking about a lot for many, many years to come. Not just a part of Nolan's filmography, but as a part of whether Oppenheimer should be feeling a bit more remorseful about his actions, or do people kind of register that he was basically guilty from day one, or he kind of knew what he signed up for. So I feel like Oppenheimer is a 9 out of 10. So, what do you think of Oppenheimer? Let me know in the comments down below. Subscribe to my channel, follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and like this video. And this is Elijah Wells, and bye.